Risky bet.
It's risky, man.
Well, that's why he was clearly number 4 of the 4 options and why he got the smallest deal, because I think a lot of contenders looked at him and went, yeah, we feel pretty good about the next 2 or 3 years. It's everything after that we're worried about. Whereas with guys like Bogarts and Correa and Turner, you're like, no, I feel good about these guys for at least the next 6 years. You know, the real pain for those contracts isn't going to come for quite some time.
And I think maybe that's why the Correa stuff is being held up, where it's like, we're giving Carlos Correa a lot of money. Let's make sure that with all this money that everything checks out.
Sure. Or, I mean, this also could just be he's got like a bad cold or something and they just had to... I mean, everyone is sick across the country right now, so it may just be...
Do you think that's what it could be?
I think so. I mean, I do find it weird that the Giants simply said it's been postponed and that it's just kind of vague injury or illness stuff, but... I think if it were something super, super major, we would have heard about it by now. I feel like it would have leaked somehow. Then again, it feels like the big news always breaks like 30 minutes after we finish recording.
I'm glad you said that, John, because I saw the Correa, and I was just
the Correa thing happened like 2 hours after we were done recording. The Judge signing happened like 2 hours after we were done recording. Like, it's very annoying.
It's just very annoying.
Just sitting there being like, well, I'm glad I talked about Aaron Judge maybe leaving the Yankees, only for by the time everyone hears this. I think it's funny, they only just officially announced the deal today. They finally finalized it. I assume Judge was on vacation or something, but that press conference will be on Wednesday to announce him as the future forever Yankee.
For sure, and they had a good tweet, the Yankees did.
About how
the arson judge
making an arson joke.
Yeah. But in terms of actually what happened here in the Correa signing, because you were wondering if Farhan Zaidi was going to actually pull the trigger on something like this, if they were actually going to go down this big money rabbit hole. And I mean, San Francisco's been looming on the periphery for a while, and they're a good team, and obviously have played above expectations the last few years. Not real contenders, but they're in that ballpark. One of the issues with them, obviously, is just that like you have the Dodgers in your division year over year, which is it's just the reality. Like, it just makes things more difficult. Then you have the Padres, who are just throwing money and deal after deal to make this thing work. So if you're the Giants, I can understand why you're like, man, this is tough. Like, it's going to be really hard to gauge how good our team is, because like the Giants, I think, would be the best team in the NL Central if they played an NL Central schedule right now.
Sure.
And I think that is something that makes jobs like Farhan Zaidi's job a bit more complicated. But he goes after Carlos Correa, and I mean, if you're the Rockies or the Diamondbacks, you're like, all right, I guess we're punting on another season of any kind of competition.
I mean, if you're the Rockies, you've been punting, whether it's intentional or not, for the last like 15 years. So there's that.
Just give Chris Bryant to the Giants.
No, man, Chris Bryant loves being in Denver. No one cares about what he does out there. He can just stand in left field. Nobody gives a shit. Yeah. It's great. Like if I were a baseball player who cared first and foremost about money and comfort, I would go to Colorado and just be like, just give me whatever deal you want. Just, I want to come here.
But I need to win a title first, because
exactly. Like, I mean, and that's what worked out for Bryant, is he already had his World Series ring. And I'm not saying Chris Bryant is happy with one World Series. I'm sure he would love to win all the World Series. But I also think his priorities maybe something closer to, I want a guaranteed contract that's big and long where I can just chill. You know, and there's no pressure on me to be the franchise savior. There's no I don't know. Maybe Chris Bryant just doesn't want to play in October. Maybe he just likes having that month off. Maybe he's a big college football guy and he just likes having that month off so he can watch games. Maybe he's got a lot of Maybe he's got a lot of weddings coming up in October over the next few years, and he's just like, I need to make sure my calendar's clear for that. So I got to sign with the one team that is never going to play in October.
And the one fan base that's not going to be upset if I play, I just have 181
How can you be upset? I mean, I know there are Rockies fans who are upset, and I completely understand why, because that team is mismanaged all the way around. But on the other hand, games at Coors Field are a very chill, comfortable time. You get to watch all the best teams in the NL West come there on a regular basis, although I guess less so now because of the newly rebalanced schedule. It's a really nice ballpark. The beer is good. Like, the drinks are good. It's a weed legal
about a little place
state
called Aspen,
where the women flock like the salmon of Capistrano. But yeah,
I bring this back to the Giants with the Correa. So if the rumored numbers and years are correct, John, do you like this fit over the other possibilities for Correa?
I think so. I don't really know where else he could have gone. I guess the other options were Chicago, but by the fact that they signed Swanson, it's pretty clear they weren't willing to play in Correa's ballpark, I think. Otherwise, it would have been. I mean, we'll never really know how interested the Dodgers are were. I think it's very clear that they play their cards very close to the vest. It's also very clear that this Dodgers offseason, they're not really looking to spend big. All of their signings have been smaller, very short term deals, for whatever reason that happens to be. I
wanted Baltimore. We wanted it. We wanted to wield that into existence.
But it's also really clear that Baltimore is not in a spending place
hold
either.
On, John. What gives you that impression? What about this winner from Baltimore gives you the impression?
Look, when they signed Adam Frazier, I just started hooting and hollering. I was like, the boys in Birdland are back. Yeah, I think that ultimately, after the Yankees signed Judge, and I don't really know that they were a realistic landing spot for Correa even without him, and after the Padres signed Bogarts and they finally got the guy who was willing to take their money, and since Turner went to the Phillies early, those Philadelphia, San Francisco, and I think you could argue Chicago and Boston, I guess, were the teams where you're like, yeah, y'all need a shortstop. Y'all really need a shortstop. And with San Francisco, I think part of the thinking is, well, if that money's not going to go to Aaron Judge, and we're not going to re-sign Carlos Rodon, and we don't really have any long-term deals we need to hand out anytime soon, and we've got money coming off the books in the form of Brandon Belt and Evan Longoria and Brandon Crawford next season and whatnot, then we might as well spend it. And I think if you're going to spend it, then a young, powerful, great defensive shortstop is probably the best way to spend it. Correa is a guy who I think should age very well. When his shortstop is no longer a thing from him, I think it should be pretty easy to move him over to third or second base. Not a position that the Giants have any real long-term solutions at shortstop. Obviously, they've had Crawford there forever, who will now no longer be playing shortstop there. He'll have to move over, I guess, to third base for the next season. This really did just make the most sense for them in terms of if we want to add an impact bat at the position of need, this is the one that makes the most sense for us. It was either going to be that him or Judge, I think, that would have made the most sense for San Francisco. I think, if anything, Correa probably makes more sense than Judge because he does play that premium defensive position, whereas Judge was only ever going to be a corner outfielder for that contract. I don't know that. I mean, he could have played a little center, but he obviously wasn't going to be anything other than a right fielder for the long term of that deal. Whereas Correa, again, will play the more premium defensive position. They're both really great defenders, Judge and Correa. But yeah, I think if you're the Giants, and I guess part of this too is if you want to be able to stay in that race with the Dodgers and the Padres to any real extent, or at the very least continue to call yourself a wild card contender, you needed to make that kind of impact addition. And I think Correa was the best option, certainly still left on the market, but probably the one that made the most sense for them ultimately, regardless of the years and the money.
Yeah, wonder.
And part of it too is also just to finish up is like when I mentioned that whole thing about the high variance, high volatility teams where you do the mid tier free agents and you try to supplement from within, as the Giants have tried to do. Again, you saw the downside of that last year with the Giants, where it's like when guys start getting hurt, you just do not have the body, and you don't have the bodies. Like having that elite talent like Correa raises the floor for everybody. You're not starting from a position of, okay, we're going from a 2-win player to a 0-win player when that 2-win player gets hurt. It's, well, if a 2-win player gets hurt, fine. We still have the 5 or 6-win guy at shortstop. So long as Correa is healthy, he will help keep that roster more afloat than it has been than it was especially last season. And I think too, it's also, an admission on the Giants' part. I think that, I think we all felt to a certain degree like 2021 was a little fluky for them, primarily because it relied on so many older guys producing kind of above beyond what we were projecting them to, and last year was more of kind of a severe regression, but a regression nonetheless. Yeah. So I think it's also kind of the implicit admission that, hey, we can't really get away with that. Like, if we want to be regular contenders, we need to have, locked in elite players. And also, again, defensively too, with that pitching staff, especially that the Giants have, especially with Logan Webb, who gets a lot of ground balls, having an elite defensive shortstop, that much more important for a Giants team that was really, really bad defensively last year and really needed to improve in that category. And Correa will do that for them.
And you like that Flores and LaStella are just bench guys that...
Yeah, and that's what they should be. You should not be in a position where Tommy LaStella and Wilmer Flores are starting on the regular for you. Those are valuable platoon and reserve bats and gloves. Maybe not so much in Wilmer's case. He's not much of a defender. But yeah, you want to have... It's almost like having... It's like signing an elite closer where it just resets the bullpen. So it's like, oh, I like this guy better when I don't have to worry about him having to get all the most important outs. He only has to get some of the most important outs. That's better. Everyone in that bullpen hierarchy takes one step down, which means not only do you have more good pitchers available to spread out more over the course of the game, but you also don't have that one really bad reliever that you have to roster because it's like, well, who else are we going to put on this roster? Similar with Correa. This is a big improvement from running out Brandon Crawford on opening day, and it's a big improvement over whoever the backup would have been to Brandon Crawford on opening day. Probably Wilmer Flores, which is not a good sign. Or was not a good sign, rather.
No, but... I'm very curious to see what happens with the Giants. And their rotation's just so weird. Because, if you're a long-term baseball fan, and you would have told, you and I, John, 4 years ago, the Giants' rotation would consist of Alex Cobb, Sean Manaea, Ross Stripling, and Alex Wood. And we'd be like, this team could be a real contender.
All those guys are the same guy. San Francisco is a very particular type of guy that they like. For what it's worth, I really like the Stripling signing for them. I thought that was a perfect fit. But
they're all old outside of Logan Webb. 32, 33, 31, and 35.
It's very much a placeholder rotation because I think San Francisco is another one of those teams that has decided we are not handing out long-term deals to pitchers unless they are the elite of the elite. And I think you could argue, well, then what is Carlos Rodon to you guys? He is the elite of the elite, and he actually got, I thought, a much smaller deal than he was going to end up getting. Especially.
But do you like that deal more than Manaea or Manaea? Why do I keep saying? Is it Manaea or Manaea?
Manaea. Well, it's apples to oranges, right? Manaea is in no way, shape, or form a Carlos Rodon replacement.
Yeah.
It's more the idea that instead of concentrating all our resources in the 180 innings that Carlos Rodon will give us, we will concentrate that on the, let's say, 280 to 320 that Manaea and Stripling plus will get us, It's more, I think it's about, in that case, it's spreading out the risk, so to speak.
Yeah.
The Giants clearly are not the team, they already made the big Correa signing, and very clearly they'd rather invest in the position player than the pitcher. And I think that makes sense, especially because I also don't think the Giants are one pitcher away, I don't think that bringing Rodon back...
It's not their ethos, right? This is not who, Andrew Bailey and all those guys and that profile of, this staff is no, we want to be the Rangers, just a souped-up version of the Texas Rangers, where you come into San Francisco and we maximize these guys that everyone else doesn't want to get the big deals to.
And I think that's the other thing, too, is they feel probably with a guy like Manaea or with a guy with Stripling, or, as has been the case already with guys like Wood and Cobb, that there is an underlying level of performance that they feel that they can bring out if they can keep them healthy and make some, changes, additions, whatever, tweaks to their repertoire, to their mechanics, that'll make them a better version of the pitcher they are. Again, it's higher risk because those guys have a lower floor, obviously, than a guy like Rodon, injuries notwithstanding, a lower floor and a lower ceiling. But at the same time, I understand that Giants mindset of, no, we'd rather just use that money to sign 3 pitchers whom we think can all kind of be kind of high 3s, mid 3s ERA guys, as opposed to the one guy who's guaranteed to be a 3.25 ERA, but then have to worry about filling out the back of the rotation with prospects who aren't ready, or guys like Jordan Lyles or Kyle Gibson. I think that makes sense to me for San Francisco.
What
I think
did Lyles sign? KC?
2 years, $17 million, which.
Sure. Royals.
Whatever. There's no point in thinking about what the Royals are doing at any given time because it is just the inexorable march forward of time, essentially. The Royals are just entropy. They will just keep doing things until there is no more to be done. Good for Jordan Lyles, too, I guess. How that dude has had a surprisingly long career for someone who has never been anything better than a 4 starter. Really something.
He's first rounder, right?
I don't remember. In my mind, Jordan Lyles has been in the majors since 2004.
Well, he came up early with the Rockies, didn't he?
Oh, he was a Astros draft pick in 2008.
But did he debut with the Rockies? Or
no, he was in Houston for 3 years, and then he went to the Rockies. And then here's how many teams Jordan Lyles has been on. This is actually kind of fun. Houston, Colorado, San Diego, Milwaukee, Pittsburgh, Milwaukee again, Texas, Baltimore, and now Kansas City. That is team number 9 in what has been an 11-year career so far. Also, fun fact, and I don't know how many guys like this are left, Jordan Lyles was on the last Astros team that was still in the National League back in 2012.
Wow.
Yeah. He is a marker for the end of one era and the beginning of another. Jordan Lyles. He's like one of the rings on the inside of a sequoia where you can tell it's oh, this historical event. the Jordan Lyles year.
Fangraphs writers, use this if you can.
Yeah,
John
please.
will appreciate it.
Do something. I mean, we have someone writing. Michael Bauman actually wrote the Jordan Lyles signing analysis that'll be out.
You can edit it in. You're an editor, John. Edit in Jordan Lyles, this portion of it.
Look, I mean, Bauman wrote it. There's a good chance he's referencing Sequoia tree rings anyway. Like,
It's true.
But yeah,
I
think
it's just the unfortunate thing is the South Carolina stuff with him. It's just we all can't be perfect, but when I see the Gamecock stuff with him,
I love that for you. The SEC stuff is the game breaker. It's just
it really bought it. Look, I don't like it any more than anybody else, but they're frauds, and I hope nothing but the worst for them.
Yeah, now you have to have Bauman on this podcast, and don't talk any baseball. Like literally no baseball. It's just SEC and college baseball talk.
I mean, I'm here for it. Remember when South Carolina was good at baseball? It was a long time ago.
Michael Bauman does.
Yeah, he does.
That was years and years and years ago. Like 20
we can talk about
years
Chase
now.
Dillender going number 1 overall next year.
Look, honestly, if you want a college baseball podcast, he is an insane college baseball sicko. He loves college baseball.
See, I can't do that. Like, there's just too much going on. And you just have, like, Cal State Fullerton's good, and there's just so much stuff to watch all over the place. You're like, there's no way I can have a great handle on this until the regionals, super regionals, and all that kind of stuff. All I can do is Tennessee baseball. And I've got the Braves, Major League Baseball going on. How is he able to juggle all that? Can't do it.
Beats
it's
me.
Too much.
But I highly recommend you have him on, especially around the draft, because he's also a big draft guy. Especially with that running into... because they do the draft now after the tournament or before? It used to be during, which I always found to be the dumbest thing.
After.
It's after now. Okay.
It has to be after.
So look at that. You can do an NCAA tournament pod. You can do some draft podding too. Mm-hmm. You can do the Chase Dollander talking. Future
Chase Burns talking.
Who got the number 1 pick this year? Pittsburgh.
Is it Pittsburgh or is it Washington?
I can't remember now. Either way, Chase Dollander, future guy who's going to get traded in 5 years to a better team. Like, it's great.
He's going to be awesome. Chase Dollander is a great player. And you know what's also going to be awesome? You get to watch him up close and personal. Yeah, so it's Pittsburgh 1.